Humans are, without question, the most perplexing species to join the Galactic Council in the last 400 cycles, said Vorax, his six-eye stalk swiveling in what we call the contemplative pattern. I should know. As the official xenological recorder for the Council, it's my job to document every species, their quirks, their capabilities, and most importantly, their potential threats. My name is Zik Tox, and I have been observing humans since they stumbled onto the galactic scene just 7 cycles ago. Perplexing is putting it mildly, I replied, my skin flickering the pale blue shade of amused skepticism. Have you seen the data on their homeworld? They evolved on a death trap. Their planet has mind-numbing temperature variations, catastrophic weather events, and over 60% of the surface is covered in a corrosive liquid they call water. And yet they swim in it. For fun. Vorax's laughter came out as a series of clicking sounds. And don't forget their bizarre obsession with creating fictional scenarios about their own extinction. What was that entertainment series you showed me? The one where they fantasize about tiny invisible organisms wiping them out? Endemic movies, I said, my voice translator struggling with the human term. Yes, they have hundreds of them. They are oddly fixated on imagining their own demise. We were in the observation deck of the Grand Council chamber, watching the humans prepare for today's emergency session. There were 3 of them, Ambassador Dana Powell, Military Liaison Commander Jack Foster, and their cultural specialist, Dr. Mei Lu. They all wore the standard blue and silver uniforms of Earth's United Planetary Alliance, crisp and proper. They are so small, Vorax noted. Hard to believe they are classified as a potential Class 4 species. I nodded. That's what makes them fascinating. They don't look dangerous. But their historical records? My skin rippled with the dark purple of concern. They have been fighting each other since before they discovered fire. Their technological development has been driven almost exclusively by warfare. And yet, Vorax countered, they have been nothing but polite since joining us. Deferential, even. That's what worries me, I admitted. It doesn't match their psychological profile. It's like they are holding back. The chamber's notification tones chimed, signaling the imminent start of the session. Vorax and I took our places at the recording station as the council members filed in. The humans stood at their designated platform, back straight, faces composed in those strange, flat expressions they called professional. A High Counselor Driza of the Paxian Collective called the session to order, her resonant voice echoing through the chamber. Esteemed members of the Council, we convene today to address the Haxon incursion into Protected Sector 7, an area under human jurisdiction as per Treaty 5924. I noticed Ambassador Powell's shoulders tense slightly, though her face remained neutral. The Haxon representative, a bulky, armored being named Grull, let out a dismissive snort. This session is a waste of resources. Sector 7 contains a single inhabited planet of pre-spaceflight primitives of no strategic value. Our mining operations will not interfere with their development. With respect, Representative Grull, Ambassador Powell said, her voice measured and calm. Earth's protective stance on developing civilizations is well documented and was acknowledged when we joined the Council. The Nakari people of Sector 7 may be pre-spaceflight, but they have a rich culture and are showing signs of technological advancement. Commander Foster stood slightly behind Powell, his face impassive but his eyes never leaving Grull. I made a note of his elevated heart rate, visible through my sensory enhancements. Grull's exoskeleton plates clicked together in what I recognized as the Haxon equivalent of derisive laughter. Your species' sentimentality is noted, human. However, the Haxon Empire has already deployed extraction units to the sector. A murmur went through the council chamber. This was a clear violation of protocol. High Counselor Driza's voice cut through the noise. Representative Grull, deployment before council review is explicitly forbidden by. The Haxon Empire acknowledges your concerns, Grull interrupted, an unthinkable breach of etiquette. But we operate according to practical necessity, not bureaucratic niceties. The rare minerals in that sector are required for our defensive systems. The decision is made. I watched the humans carefully. Dr. Liu whispered something to Ambassador Powell, whose expression remained diplomatically neutral, though I detected a slight flush in her facial capillaries, a human stress response. Perhaps, Powell said, still maintaining that eerily calm tone, we could discuss a compromise. A limited extraction with environmental safeguards and no contact with the Nakari. Grull's sensory appendages twitched with what I recognized as contempt. Your species has been on the galactic stage for less than a decade, human. You have not earned the right to propose terms to an empire that has stood for millennia. The chamber grew quiet. Even for the Haxon, known for their directness, this was extraordinarily disrespectful. Powell's smile remained fixed in place, but something changed in Commander Foster's stance. It was subtle, a slight shift in weight, a minuscule squaring of the shoulders, but my xenological training screamed warnings at me. I will clarify our position, Powell said, her voice now carrying an undertone I hadn't heard from a human diplomat before. The Nakari system falls under Earth's protection by Council Treaty. Your extraction units are to withdraw immediately. Grull stepped forward, his massive form towering over the human delegation. Or what, little human? Your species is new, untested. The Haxon have conquered worlds while your ancestors were still figuring out agriculture. That's when it happened. I have replayed the recording thousands of times since, analyzing every nuance. The humans exchanged glances, just a quick, silent communication, and something shifted in the chamber's atmosphere. Commander Foster stepped forward. Ambassador, permission to speak freely? Powell nodded. The diplomatic approach appears to be at an impasse. Commander, you have the floor. Foster turned to face Grull. Gone was the rigid, respectful posture. His stance loosened, becoming somehow more natural yet more threatening. Even his voice changed, dropping the formal diction for something more authentic. Let me put this in terms you will understand, Grull, Foster said, and I noticed several council members stir at the lack of honorific. What you are seeing right now from humanity? It's what we call our polite mode. It's the face we put on because the grown-ups told us to play nice with the other kids. Grull's sensory appendages flattened against his exoskeleton, a sign of surprise. You dare. I'm not finished, Foster cut him off, sending another shock wave through the chamber. No one interrupted a Haxon warrior caste representative. No one. See, humanity spent thousands of years perfecting the art of killing each other before we finally figured out how to get along. Then we spent a few more centuries preparing for alien threats that never came. When we finally met you all, we were almost disappointed at how peaceful everything was. Foster began to pace slowly, his eyes never leaving Grull. Our leaders decided we should be on our best behavior, show everyone our civilized side. But here's the thing about humans, we are really good at being polite right up until it stops working. I glanced at my monitors, noting with alarm that the human stress hormones weren't elevated at all. If anything, his readings showed increased comfort. You mentioned our ancestors figuring out agriculture, Foster continued. Funny story about that. Know what happened to the human tribes that didn't adapt to farming? The farmers wiped them out. Not because we were stronger individually, but because cooperation let us build things like armies and siege weapons. He gestured around the chamber. We respect the council. Genuinely. But make no mistake, our respect isn't born from weakness. It's a choice. The chamber had gone completely silent. Even High Counselor Driza seemed too stunned to call for order. So here's what's going to happen, Foster said, his voice now carrying an almost pleasant tone that somehow made his words more ominous. Your extraction units will leave Nakari space. Now, not because the Council demands it, though they do, but because if they don't, you will force us to turn off polite mode. And trust me, no one in this room wants to see that. Grull's exoskeleton plates quivered with rage. Are you threatening the Haxon Empire, human? Foster smiled, not the practiced diplomatic smile I'd seen before, but something older, something predatory. Not at all. I'm just sharing a cultural insight. Humans have a saying, fuck around and find out. Consider this your educational moment. Ambassador Powell stepped forward. What Commander Foster means? Foster held up a hand. With respect, Ambassador, I think I was perfectly clear. The tension in the room was palpable. I had studied countless species and witnessed numerous diplomatic incidents, but something about this felt different. Dangerous in a way I couldn't quite quantify. Grohl turned to the council at large. Does the council permit such disrespect? Such threats? My counselor Driza seemed to find her voice. Representative Grohl, given your own breach of protocol regarding deployment before authorization, perhaps we should focus on the substantive issue at hand. The substantive issue, Foster said before Grohl could respond, is whether the Haxon Empire believes its need for resources outweighs humanity's demonstrated willingness to defend those under our protection. Dr. Liu, who had remained silent until now, added, perhaps a historical reference would be helpful. In Earth's Second World War, the Japanese Admiral Yamamoto, after attacking a U.S. naval base, reportedly said, I fear all we have done is to awaken a sleeping giant and fill him with a terrible resolve. Are you comparing yourselves to a giant? Grohl scoffed, though I noted his subordinates shifting uncomfortably behind him. No, Foster said. We are comparing you to those who underestimated us. That's when my emergency alert pinged. My assistant, Ven Kay, rushed into the chamber, bypassing security protocols, something that simply wasn't done. Recorder Ziktox, she gasped, handing me a data crystal. This just arrived from the monitoring station in Sector 7. I inserted the crystal into my console, and the chamber's main display activated automatically. The footage showed a region of space near the Nakari homeworld. There, surrounding the dozen Haxon extraction vessels, were over 50 ships of unfamiliar design. Human ships. They were smaller than the Haxon vessels, less imposing at first glance. But my tactical training allowed me to recognize the weapon systems, the formation patterns, the perfect positioning that gave them firing solutions on every Haxon ship. The chamber erupted in confused chatter. The Haxon delegation huddled together, communicating urgently. I turned to the human delegation in shock. How? I asked. Professional detachment momentarily forgotten. Your species has no record of having this many vessels. The council registration shows only 20 ships in your fleet. Foster's expression hadn't changed. We registered our diplomatic and trade vessels, as required. These are different. What are they? Vorax asked. Foster looked directly at Grohl as he answered. Humanity's insurance policy. Ambassador Powell stepped forward again, resuming her diplomatic tone. The Council should know that Earth maintains defensive capabilities beyond what we have had cause to disclose. We had hoped such disclosure would never be necessary. High Counselor Driza's voice cut through the chaos. Ambassador Powell, this concealment of military assets is highly irregular and potentially a violation of. With respect, High Counselor. Powell interjected. Earth joined the Council with the understanding that we maintained the right to self-defense and the defense of those under our protection. We disclosed what was required for peaceful interaction. Nothing in the Charter demands full military transparency from member species. As chaos continued to spread through the chamber, I noticed Dr. Liu approach Commander Foster. Jack, she whispered, though my enhanced hearing caught it, was the Second Fleet really necessary? Admiral Wu could have handled this with just the vanguard. Foster's reply froze my blood. We needed to make a point, may I? And the Second Fleet was closest. The First and Third are still in position around Earth and the colonies. There were more fleets? The implications sent my mind racing as I frantically updated my species assessment files. The emergency communication system activated, and Admiral Wu's face appeared on the main display. An older human female with silver-streaked black hair and eyes that reminded me of Kexian hunting birds, Haxon vessels. She stated without preamble, "This is Admiral Helen Wu of the Earth Defense Force. Your ships have entered protected space in violation of Treaty 5924. You will power down your extraction equipment and prepare for escort to the nearest neutral station, or we will be forced to take action. Grull stepped forward, his voice thunderous. This is an act of aggression. The Council cannot allow. The Council, Foster interrupted, is witnessing the consequences of your actions, Representative. You deployed without authorization. You dismissed diplomatic solutions. Now you face the reality that humans don't just talk. Ambassador Powell raised her hand slightly, and Foster immediately stepped back, a reminder that despite his shocking display, the chain of command remained intact within the human delegation. Representative Grull, Powell said, her voice once again measured and diplomatic, we can still resolve this peacefully. Order your ships to withdraw, and we can discuss legitimate access to non-critical resources in Sector 7 that won't impact the Nakari. The chamber fell silent as all eyes turned to Grull. The Haxon representative's exoskeleton plates shifted through patterns I recognized as conflict, calculation, and finally, reluctant recognition. This incident, he rumbled, will be remembered. Yes, Foster agreed, it will. As Grull communicated the withdrawal order to his ships, I noticed Dr. Liu and Ambassador Powell exchange relieved glances. But Commander Foster's expression remained unchanged, vigilant, ready. And that's when I understood something fundamental about humans that had eluded my analysis until now. Their polite diplomatic behavior wasn't a true reflection of their nature, it was a conscious choice made by a species intimately familiar with conflict. They weren't pretending to be something they weren't. They were choosing not to show what they truly were. As the emergency session concluded and the council members filed out in stunned silence, I caught Vorax's eye. His appendages formed the shape for recategorization urgent. I nodded. Humanity would need to be reclassified immediately. Not as the Class 4 potential threat we'd tentatively labeled them, but as something we had no classification for yet. A species that smiled politely while positioning its fleets. A species that spoke of peace while preparing for war. A species that had learned to be civilized not because they had forgotten how to be dangerous, but because they knew exactly how dangerous they could be. And we had just witnessed what happened when their polite mode began to turn off. The truly terrifying part? I suspect we'd only seen the beginning. The council chambers emptied quickly after the emergency session. Most species retreated to their designated quarters, no doubt to frantically report back to their home governments about what they'd witnessed. As the official xenological recorder, I couldn't afford such luxuries. There was too much data to process, too many implications to analyze. Tiktoks, are you coming? Vorax called from the doorway, his eye stalks quivering with barely contained excitement. Soon, I replied, my skin pulsing with the deep orange of intense concentration. I need to update our files first. This changes everything. Vorax hesitated. Should I inform the Security Classification Board? Not yet, I said, my appendages working rapidly across my data console. I need more information first. Something doesn't add up about these humans. After Vorax left, I found myself alone in the observation room adjacent to the main chamber. Or so I thought. Quite a show today, wasn't it? Came a voice from behind me. I spun around, my skin flashing the bright yellow of surprise. Ambassador Dana Powell stood in the doorway, looking far more relaxed than she had during the session. Ambassador, I said, fighting to regain my professional composure, I didn't realize anyone was still here. Powell smiled and entered the room, taking a seat across from my workstation. Commander Foster has that effect on people. Makes them forget we are in the room until he decides to speak up. Your military liaison is unusually direct, I ventured carefully. Powell laughed, a genuine sound that lacked the careful modulation I'd come to expect from human diplomats. Jack? He's actually one of our more diplomatic military officers. You should meet Admiral Wu in person sometime. Now there's someone who doesn't believe in sugarcoating. I hesitated, then decided professional curiosity outweighed protocol. Ambassador, may I ask you something unofficially? Just between us xenological researchers? Powell raised an eyebrow, that peculiar human expression of curiosity. Go ahead, Recorder Zick talks. Was that display planned? The whole polite mode speech and the conveniently timed appearance of your fleet? The corner of Powell's mouth quirked upward. Let's just say we came prepared for various scenarios. The Haxon have been testing boundaries for months. But the timing. Pure luck, she said, though her expression suggested otherwise. Or maybe the universe has a sense of humor. Before I could press further, my console pinged with an urgent message. "Excuse me, Ambassador," I said, quickly scanning the notification. My skin darkened to the violet shade of concern. "Problem?" Powell asked, her tone casual but her posture suddenly alert. "The Haxon extraction fleet, they are not withdrawing as promised. They have adopted a defensive formation around the largest mineral deposit in the sector and have activated what appear to be mining drones." Powell's expression hardened instantly. The transformation was remarkable, from conversational to commanding in less than a second. She tapped her communication device. "Foster, Lou, we have a situation. Meet me in the human embassy immediately." She stood, straightening her uniform with a sharp tug. "I'm afraid we will have to continue our chat another time, Recorder. Duty calls." "Of course, Ambassador," I replied, but she was already striding toward the door. She paused at the threshold. "Recorder Zick talks. What's your professional assessment of the Haxon? As a species, I mean." The question caught me off guard. They are hierarchical, expansionist, and value strength above all else. They respect power and little else. "Why do you ask?" "Just confirming what we already knew," she said cryptically, and then she was gone. I sat there for exactly 12 seconds before making my decision. As official xenological recorder, I had certain privileges, including access to the Council's comprehensive surveillance network. What I was about to do wasn't technically illegal, but it certainly stretched the boundaries of ethical research. With a few quick commands, I accessed the feed to the Human Embassy's main conference room. Justified, I told myself, as vital xenological research on a potentially misclassified species. The feed flickered to life just as the three humans entered the room. They moved differently now. Gone was the careful, measured body language of diplomats. They moved with purpose, with efficiency. "The Haxon called our bluff," Foster said without preamble, throwing himself into a chair. "We weren't bluffing," Powell replied, her tone sharp. "They don't know that," Dr. Liu interjected, pulling up holographic displays of the standoff in Sector 7. "Their cultural framework doesn't allow for the possibility that we'd risk open conflict as a new council member." "How long until Admiral Wu requests authorization to fire?" Powell asked, pacing the room. Foster checked his device. "She's already submitted the request. Waiting on your go-ahead." Powell stopped pacing. "And if we give that authorization, we reveal to the entire council that we are not just willing to show force, but to use it." "And if we don't," Foster countered, "we show that our threats are empty. From what I understand about the Haxon, that's practically an invitation for them to test us further." Dr. Liu's fingers danced across her holographic interface. "There may be a third option. The Nakari civilization, the pre-spaceflight species we are protecting, they have legends about sky guardians in their ancient texts." Foster rolled his eyes. "Are you suggesting we play gods?" "I thought we had protocols against that sort of thing." "Not gods," Liu corrected. "But we could make our presence known to them in a limited way. The Haxon avoid any direct contact with developing species. It's one of their few cultural taboos. If we establish a visible presence on the Nakari homeworld, the Haxon would be forced to back off or violate their own cultural strictures," Powell finished, a slow smile spreading across her face. "May, you are brilliant." "It's still interference," Foster pointed out. "Minimal interference," Liu countered. "We establish a small outpost, visible enough that the Nakari know we are there, but with strict non-engagement protocols. We give them nothing beyond our presence. And it gives us legitimate grounds to maintain a military defense force in the area," Powell added. "Not just ships passing through, but a permanent installation. Foster nodded slowly, his resistance visibly fading. Admiral Wu won't like changing tactics mid-operation. Admiral Wu doesn't need to like it, Howell said firmly. She needs to execute it. I watched, fascinated, as the three humans rapidly formulated their plan. There was none of the posturing or status signaling that would have dominated a similar meeting among most council species. They challenged each other's ideas openly, built upon suggestions without concern for who received credit, and reached consensus with remarkable speed. "We will need council approval," Foster noted as they finalized the details. Powell's expression turned calculating. "Not necessarily. The Protection Treaty gives us broad latitude for defensive measures. We can establish the outpost and inform the Council simultaneously. Present them with a fait accompli," Lou said with a nod. "Bold." "That's one word for it," Foster muttered, but he was already preparing implementation orders. I quickly closed the feed as they wrapped up their meeting, my mind racing. This wasn't just a minor diplomatic incident anymore, this was humans actively rewriting the rules of engagement. 3 rotation cycles later, the Council reconvened in emergency session. The Haxon delegation was noticeably larger this time, including several members of their warrior caste in full ceremonial armor. Representative Grull stood before the Council, his exoskeleton gleaming under the chamber lights. The human actions constitute a direct violation of non-interference statutes. They have established an unauthorized presence on a pre-spaceflight world and revealed themselves to the native population. Councilor Driza turned to the human delegation. "Ambassador Powell, these are serious accusations. How do you respond?" Powell stepped forward, the picture of diplomatic calm. "The Council's own regulations permit protective measures for developing civilizations. Our outpost on Nakari Prime serves that precise function, protection. We have not interfered with their development or shared technology. We have simply made ourselves visible enough to disrupt their entire cultural and religious framework." Grull thundered, his armored appendages clattering against the podium. "Speaking of disruption," Commander Foster interjected, stepping forward to stand beside Powell. "Our sensors indicate your extraction vessels attempted to harvest resources from the Nakari's moon before withdrawing. Resources, I might add, that contain radioactive elements that would have poisoned the Nakari atmosphere had mining commenced." The chamber erupted in murmurs. "Is this true, Representative Grull?" Councilor Driza demanded, her normally melodious voice sharp with concern. Grull's sensory appendages flattened against his exoskeleton. "The resources were necessary for weapons manufacturing," Foster cut in. "Specifically, displacement cannons that have been banned by Council Treaty 8942. This time, the chamber didn't just murmur, it roared. Displacement weapons were among the few technologies unanimously banned by all Council species, capable of tearing holes in space-time itself. I watched as Grull's subordinates shifted uncomfortably, some even edging away from their leader. This was not part of the official complaint they had come to present. "These accusations are baseless," Grull declared, but his usual confidence had faltered. "Are they?" Dr. Liu asked, stepping forward with a data crystal. "We have submitted comprehensive scans of the mineral deposits, along with intercepted communications between your extraction fleet and your weapons division. High Counselor, if you will permit the evidence to be presented." Driza gestured to her assistants, who quickly retrieved the crystal and inserted it into the chamber's main display system. What followed was damning. Detailed chemical analyses, communication transcripts, and even visual confirmation of prototype displacement technology aboard one of the Haxon vessels. I glanced at my monitors, noting with interest that all 3 humans showed elevated stress markers despite their outward composure. They had gambled enormously with this move. "Representative Grull," High Counselor Driza said, her voice cold as vacuum, "these actions constitute multiple treaty violations of the highest order. The Council will require the immediate presence of your Imperial Overseer to address these charges." Grull's exoskeleton plates clattered in what I recognized as extreme agitation. But the humans provoked. Enough. The voice that cut through the chamber didn't belong to any council member. It came from a Haxon standing at the back of their delegation, older, his exoskeleton bearing the distinctive markings of their scientist caste. He stepped forward, shoving past the warrior caste members. "I am Zan Tor, chief researcher of the Imperial Science Division. What Representative Grull fails to mention is that these actions were undertaken without full Imperial authorization." The Haxon delegation erupted in hisses and clicking sounds as Zangtor approached the central podium. Displacement weapon research was discontinued by Imperial Decree 50 cycles ago. Grull represents a faction that believes our empire has grown complacent. Traitor. Grull lunged toward Zan-Tor, only to find himself facing Commander Foster, who had moved with startling speed to place himself between the two Haxons. "That's enough," Foster said quietly, not shouting, not threatening, but with an authority that stopped Grull mid-motion. Council security forces quickly surrounded the Haxon delegation, separating Grull and his most loyal followers from the others. "This is most irregular," High Counselor Dreeza said, though I detected a note of fascination in her voice. "Researcher Zan-Tor, the Council acknowledges your intervention. Representative Grull and his associates will be detained pending Imperial review." As the security forces escorted Grull away, his angry clicks and hisses echoing through the chamber, I noticed Ambassador Powell approach Zan-Tor. "You took a significant risk exposing this faction within your government," she said. Zan-Tor's sensory appendages formed a pattern indicating respect, something I had never seen a Haxon direct toward a human before. "Your species' actions forced our hand. Many in the Imperial hierarchy have watched with concern as Grull's faction gained influence. Your directness provided the opportunity we needed to expose them." Howell smiled, not the diplomatic smile I had come to recognize, but something more genuine. "Perhaps our species have more to learn from each other than either of us realized." "Perhaps," Zan-Tor agreed, "though I must admit your methods are unsettling." "Yeah, we get that a lot," Foster said, joining them. "For what it's worth, our fleet had orders not to fire first. We may be ready for conflict, but we don't seek it." Zan-Tor's exoskeleton shifted in what I recognized as thoughtful consideration. An interesting distinction. One worth exploring further, I think. Later that evening, as I finalized my updated report on humanity, Vorax found me in my quarters. "Have you seen the latest?" he asked without preamble, his eye stalks practically vibrating with excitement. "What now?" I sighed, my skin tinged with the turquoise of exhaustion. "The humans have invited a Haxon scientific delegation to their outpost on Nakari Prime, and the Imperial Overseer has accepted." I set down my datapad. "That's unexpected." "And there's more," Vorax continued. "The Council has officially recognized humanity's right to establish protective measures in their assigned sectors. They are calling it the Powell Doctrine." I couldn't help the flicker of amusement that rippled across my skin. How very human, create a crisis, solve it spectacularly, and end up with a doctrine named after you. "You don't seem surprised," Vorax noted, his eye stalks forming a pattern of suspicion. "Let's just say I'm beginning to understand how humans operate," I replied. "They don't think like most council species. Where we see rigid protocols, they see guidelines. Where we see established orders, they see systems that can be improved or circumvented when necessary." "Should we be worried?" Vorax asked, suddenly serious. I considered the question carefully. "I don't think so. Not if we are smart enough to become their allies rather than their adversaries." "That's quite a change from your initial assessment," Vorax pointed out. I called up the final section of my report on my datapad and handed it to him. "Here's what I have concluded. Humans aren't aggressive by nature, they are protective. They don't want to conquer, they want to defend. But they have learned through their bloody history that sometimes the best defense is a show of force." Vorax scanned my report, his eye stalks twitching as he absorbed my analysis. "You have recommended a complete recategorization." "Yes," I said, "from potential threat to potential guardian. With appropriate supervision, of course." The council won't like this, Vorax warned, returning my data pad. The council, I said, my skin rippling with certainty, will learn to adapt, just as the humans have. As I transmitted my final report, I couldn't help but think about Commander Foster's words in that first confrontation with Grohl. Humans had a saying, fuck around and find out. The Haxon had found out, and in the process, so had the Council. Humanity's polite mode wasn't a facade, it was a choice. A choice made by a species that understood exactly how not to be polite when the situation demanded it. And somehow, against all my training and instincts, I found that more reassuring than concerning. Because a species that chooses peace despite knowing war intimately is perhaps the best guardian developing civilizations could hope for. The Council might never fully understand humans, but as long as they remained our allies, maybe they didn't need to.